there's 100 different steps that you can take, and by the way, 95 of them might kill you. 5 of them are the right one, and you've got to spend so much energy and time and really go with your gut and do your research to try to figure out what is that next step.
Welcome back to another episode of Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions. I'm your host, Jeff Barnes, and today we talk with Jeff Hernandez, who is running a roughly $200 million per year coffee company. And we're really excited about this interview and his journey to going from, a young guy with an ambition of just opening up a little coffee shop to all of a sudden running a 9-figure business that's potentially going public. So really excited for you to hear the journey and everything that he went through and learn a lot of different pieces and parts and insights into how do you take an idea into a market during a financial downturn, having a company that had to weather the ups and downs of things like the pandemic and COVID and shutdowns and real estate prices and everything else that's going on in the world right now, to becoming a very successful company that I think you're going to want to be a part of if you get an opportunity. So listen in, and as always, like, subscribe, and share. And thanks so much for being here.
Welcome to Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions, the place to learn how to fund, scale, exit, and massively profit as an angel investor or entrepreneur. Brought to you by the Angel Investors Network. And now, here's your host, Jeff Barnes.
Welcome back to another episode of Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions. I'm your host, Jeff Barnes, and today we're meeting with Jeff Hernandez, who's in his barn out in Maui. So, Jeff, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. We're just chatting a little bit before we started recording here and learn a little bit about you and your background. And we're going to talk about Black Rock Coffee Bar, not to get confused with the other Black Rocks that are out there.
Yes, yes, there's a big
Jeff,
one.
you're in Hawaii right now for the wintertime. I think some of us are going to be a little bit envious of that. But, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this world of coffee.
Yeah, the shortest version, there's obviously a million different caveats I could go into, but the short version is that we started as a family business. I was in commercial construction, right out of high school, basically, did a little bit of college, never finished college, but went into commercial construction, worked my way up from being a, parts runner where I'd run stuff to the job sites to a laborer working on, a big pipeline project for Pacific Power, and then finally up to kind of being a junior project manager and a safety officer. And, loved construction. I absolutely love to build things. That probably is kind of what comes in the building of the business. But I didn't like about construction, like I said, being the safety officer. I remember specifically being on this giant job, this 180,000 square foot manufacturing plant. And, it was like, we're going to charge the ammonia lines today, everybody. So going through the safety protocol, and it's like, if this breaks, half of you are going to die, or it was something crazy like that. It was just, it was really rough. And so I think that was the moment where I just said, man, I love to build things, but maybe let's look at something different. And so at the same time, I also had started dating who is now my wife, Tiffany, and her family actually was already involved in kind of some elements of coffee. And so at that point, we all kind of decided, hey, let's go out and do coffee. We were never actually going to be partners, though, which is kind of an interesting thing. And I'll kind of get how everything happened. But I wanted to my goal at that point was I wanted to get out of construction and get to Bend, Oregon, which is in the center of Oregon. I grew up in Southern Oregon, by the way, in really, known for just logging and mill towns that all kind of died in the 80s. It's kind of a depressing area in the 90s when I was in high school. There's just, the whole industry that buoyed that whole area was going away. And, there was just not a lot of economic activity or opportunity. So I wanted to get over to Bend, Oregon, which was just kind of becoming a new, interesting area. And I was like, I just want to get over there, maybe open 3 coffee shops. I'm going to have a great life. And my other family members who I was marrying into, my wife's sister's husband also, he did coffee. He wanted to go up to Portland, and then some other members wanted to go to California. We're all going to do coffee, but never be partners. So we wade into the area that you're super familiar with of commercial real estate and kind of diving into, okay, let's sign some leases. We ended up signing some leases, and this is the back half of 2007. So this is, the time back when people were still flipping their houses and making 20%, and money just seemed to just fall out of trees everywhere. However, by the time we opened in literally February 1st of 2008, the world was already quite a different place. And by 6 months in, Lehman Brothers had fallen, and we were in the middle of the Great Recession. So about the worst possible time to open a business in the last 80 years. So right away, we were just thrown into this pretty massive hurricane of an economic headwind that we should have just been buried right away. Not only that, to be honest, but we also happened to pick, and we didn't really realize this, it's just where we had grown up, but the Northwest is probably about the worst possible place competition-wise to start a coffee company. There's a coffee shop on every corner. I mean, Starbucks started there. Dutch Bros is from there. Not to mention just so many independents that are on every corner. I think Vancouver, Washington, actually, which is one of the areas we're in, is the most coffee shops per capita, one for every 2,000 people. Anyway, so to go back to the story, we opened right into that super challenging time, and we had never intended again to be, a partnership group or to do anything. We were just going to do our own thing. However, along the way, as I went to go and get my printed cups done for my coffee company that I was going to do, and my family members were also doing that for them, what kind of came up was, hey, I'm going to spend $30,000 to get my printed cups. You're going to spend $30,000 to get your printed cups. Maybe, we're only, again, the plan is I'm going to have 3 stores. You're going to have 3 stores. We're going to have a great life. But family partnerships are, a powder keg. So let's keep some distance. However, let's maybe form let's call it a dummy company. And we'll all own part of it. We'll get our cups printed. We'll share a name, share the bare minimum, agree on the bare minimum, and still have a good life. And so that kind of set us up again. We go into the recession, and then we're just struggling to survive right away. We had a couple crazy people come and want a franchise from us, even with 2 or 3 stores. And to survive, we had never intended any of that, but to survive, we said, sure, let's go for it. And so we cobbled together the money to get a franchise document together, brought on a couple of these franchisees, and that kind of started, that brought us all together into what ended up being a 6-person father-son family partnership. So pretty interesting dynamic. The first 5 years, we grew from 0 to 12 stores. I mean, just barely surviving. It was the hardest years of my life. I mean, I just remember, we'd opened 1 store. It was barely making it. We'd opened another store. We'd signed a lease of another store, just hoping that, man, if we can get this store open, maybe we can dig ourselves out of this, just barely making it every month. I mean, pretty wild. And by the way, my partner, Daniel Brand, he was always the guy who really anchored the coffee culture side, whereas I was more on the business side. Daniel was working 60 days in a row, 16 hours a day, open to close. And I was, there's a point where probably 2010 where, I was not doing construction anymore, and I just had to go on unemployment, no jobs available. I had to go look for work during the day and then do the books for the company and try to keep everything going at night. But anyway, I remember, this, again, we'd have a site going, had another lease signed. Hopefully that was going to work. And then this spot in Portland, Oregon came available that was just like, it was on one of the busiest intersections. It was one we wanted. And it was like, well, should we take this site? I mean, this is kind of, if this works, this is it. If it doesn't, we're dead. And I remember, I had my firstborn daughter, who's now 15 years old, but she was, about 2 months old in the next room. And I just remember couldn't sleep at night, went on a walk through the neighborhood and just kind of was like, man, this is it. Like, I'm throwing my whole life in on this or not. And, came back home 3 a.m. and said, we're going to do it. Open that store. And there was a bunch of months of like not being able to pay bills and stretching out payroll and doing all this, but we made it. So 0 to 12 stores in the first 5 years. Then we moved on from 2013-ish to 2018 for those next 5 years. I kind of break things up in chapters. It's kind of easier.
Well, before we go into those next 5 years, right? Sure. You just covered a lot of ground right there. And I want to stop you for a minute and first commend you on, the success you had at that point, because you're right. Going into business, especially having to sign leases, and when the world was going to hell in a handbasket, so to speak, it was not an ideal time. And like I said, you were down in southern, or so was it like Grants Pass, Medford area, or
Yeah,
central
yeah.
southern?
So it's Central Point, which is right outside of
Okay.
Medford,
Yep.
where I grew up. A little 20,000 person town. The Rogue Valley,
Actually, I
they
have
call it.
an old employee that lives right there. Has
Really,
some property there. Yep. Yep. So I know the area.
it's a beautiful area.
It is.
I
Yeah.
still love it. And again, I think it's still just. It really was an interesting place, especially in the '90s. There just wasn't a lot, the
Yeah.
'90s and even the 2000s. There's just with that area. For anybody that doesn't know, is 70-80% logging and trees and
Hmm.
forest, and that literally drove the entire economy. My dad worked at Boise Cascade, drove everything in that region until all of a sudden, the spotted owl and there was some environmental stuff. Basically, brought that whole industry to a halt in the '80s, '90s, 2000s, and the whole area is still probably recovering. So it
Yeah.
was a really interesting area, but beautiful.
Yeah, man. And then moving to Bend, Oregon, another beautiful area, right there by the Sisters, the mountains, and, just absolutely stunning area. So, you know, being in construction, being a young guy at that time, your teens, 20s, and then deciding, oh, well, hey, let's just go ahead and form this whole thing. There's a lot to be said for that. But then what I found with a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of business owners, the ones that succeed, I haven't met one that skated through all that stuff scot-free, right? Like there wasn't a single
Yeah.
person that I know that's been successful, that's built anything meaningful, that hasn't really struggled. And your struggles, they're not easy, especially having a newborn, a young baby in the other room thinking about this. I mean, again, hats off to you, man, because that struggle is real, right?
Thank you so
And
much. Yeah, no,
I
it
don't
was.
want people to gloss over that.
Yeah, no, it's true. From this point of view, it's lost some of the scariness and the fear, but absolutely, it was those moments of just knowing, like, and just to be honest too, I guess I didn't hit on this, but my dad had put a little bit of his money into it. He was also an entrepreneur. Our other fathers had put the other dads had put some money in, and all of their businesses were also kind of on the line. I mean, they really needed that money to
Yeah.
do something for them and come back to them as an investment. And so everybody who was involved, had put everything on the line here. And there was no safety nets.
Yeah.
This is it.
And it's one of those things that if you don't have the stomach for that, and how would you know, really? I mean,
Right.
you were talking about being in construction, and being a safety officer. So I was a quality assurance guy on a submarine, working with nuclear power, and understood that world as far as safety, and like everything's got to be done properly, otherwise people can die.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in the insurance business, we had ammonia plants. We actually insured a lot of the black liquor recovery boilers in the logging industry. So I'm very familiar with what you're
Interesting.
referring to there. And yeah, safety is one of those things that I think a lot of people do take for granted. And to your point, even though entrepreneurship, it's not the same as going out there and being on the front lines anywhere and being the roughneck necessarily on the oil rig, but it's a mental issue, right? When you're like, all of a sudden you're still putting that really fight or flight response
Yep.
on a consistent basis, right?
Absolutely.
And pushing through that. And so talk to us a little bit, before we go into the next phases of growth of your company, the mindset and who you were as a person going from construction worker, safety officer to entrepreneur to eventually franchisor, right? Because a lot of
Right.
people don't do that. They don't make that leap. And those are
Right.
different hats, right?
Absolutely. Multiple different hats, and again, nothing I had any experience in. And you hit on a lot of things. I think the entrepreneur part. I think what maybe nobody realizes is, I've heard this a bit. That people just want to be an entrepreneur, and that's, I think it was Peter Thiel who said something about, like, when I hear people just say that, like, I know they're not quite on the right page. You have to be passionate about truly building something, and really putting your all into something, and then you become this entrepreneur. But absolutely, it's one of the loneliest things you can do, especially in the beginning, because what you have to do is you have to really kind of, almost everybody, especially that's working, maybe call it the 9 to 5 job, is they are on this, call it a ladder, where they know the next 5 steps in their career. They know that I'm going to get to this position and I'm going to get promoted and I'm going to execute here, I'm going to go here. And they know where they've come from. So they feel fairly secure in what they're doing every day. when you dive into the entrepreneurial bucket, they call it the abyss of freedom, right? Like there's no next step. You don't know what to do. There's 100 different steps that you can take, and by the way, 95 of them might kill you. 5 of them are the right one, and you've got to spend so much energy and time and really go with your gut and do your research to try to figure out what is that next step. So some of the things that I think definitely that I would have not known, but have come out of that really, like, because we were born in that recession, solidified in us is what I call come to call it the priority pyramid, which is, whatever you're doing, if that is a real estate project, a developer project. For me, it was a coffee shop, one of the coffee shops we do, like this location on its own. And Daniel and I, my partner, we continually talk about this, does this spot at full execution, maybe not day one, but when it's up and running, is this going to make money? Is this going to be profitable? Is this going to turn my economic engine, right? And if you can't say that, and that applies to drinks we make, right? Does this drink have the right cost of goods to be able to be profitable? Or is this one just, it's a loss leader and maybe it's trying to get somebody in, but you just need to know that. Secondarily, if you built your model that way, then you go up to, and you say, okay, what through their behavior are my customers actually saying that they want, right? I mean, I think it seems so obvious, but I think a lot of people they don't go by that. They get caught up in maybe their own dreams and thoughts, but you've got to really look into what your customers say. There's a quote actually, in I think a Malcolm Gladwell book, where it's coffee is actually one of the things that people are least consciously aware of their preferences about. I believe that he said something like, if you survey people, 75% of them say, I want strong, dark, bold coffee. But in reality, with their behavior, what they actually show is that 75% of them want pretty sweet, creamy coffee that is not bold, that's fairly weak. And so it's one of those things of like, you need to be measuring with empirical data, what do people actually want? So it's having a sound financial model. What do your customers actually want? If you've done those two things, then you've earned the right to be able to kind of have your opinion, put it out there. And honestly, it's weird. A lot of people, they reverse that. They will start with, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm passionate about. Then maybe they'll worry about customers and what customers want. But honestly, they most of the time just, pass most of that question through their own filter, what they think people will want, regardless of what the data says. And then maybe someday they'll worry about profitability, not to throw anybody under the bus, but I look at like WeWork was one of those where it's like, I'm going to raise the world's consciousness on one hand. He started with that. Then it was like, okay, this is what customers want, all of these different things. But then at the end of the day, a business model that takes long-term large leases and then breaks them up into short-term leases was probably always going to have, it was probably flawed at the beginning, right?
Right.
I learned that, and that still applies with us every day when we look at spots, we look at new locations, everything else. The other thing too is I just, again, going back to the loneliness part, is incredibly tough. Like I said, the people that are working normal jobs just are not going to understand what you're going through. Ever.
Never get it.
They just don't understand
people ask
what
me
it
all
is.
the time what it's like having been on a submarine. There's no way for me to describe that if you've never lived or been on a submarine. And
100%.
the entrepreneur route is the same thing. In fact, so when I was in the military, anybody who wasn't in the military, we called them all civilians, right? Everybody was unless you worked in the shipyard, then you were a bubba. But everybody else was a civilian. And then I get out and I'm in this entrepreneurial world eventually. And I found that some of the mentors were saying, oh, well, the entrepreneurs are, they're calling these other people that are not entrepreneurs civilians as well. I'm like, okay, I can kind of see how there's a corollary there.
There is, and it's not a derogatory term. It's just that thing of just until you're kind of in it. And again, especially I would say in a time that we were in back then, if you were there, it was such a dark economic time that it was just, everybody's pretty much looking at you going, you're insane. And what are you doing? And it took 5-6 years to even really dig out of that place where it felt like it was actually going to work. And, reading like say Shoe Dog, where Phil Knight was always on the edge of losing it all. That definitely was the case for us for the first at least 5 years, probably 7 or 8, where it just, you're stretching every day.
Before continuing, please subscribe and share this video to help us reach more people and stay notified of our latest releases. Now, Let's continue watching and learning.
Yeah. So the tagline for our company, our slogan is perpetuating free enterprise and capitalism, right? And you said something that ties right into this perfectly, which is, people will say, I want to be an entrepreneur. Well, what does that even mean, right? They have no clue what that means. Until you've done it, you won't know, right? But they say that they want to essentially go out there and sell stuff and make the world a better place, like you were saying.
Yep.
Very altruistic goals and big visions about making the world a better place. But let's face it, the best way to do that is through capitalism. I truly believe that. I don't believe that the government, the bureaucrats, the NGOs out there are going to change everything. They have their place. But in order for that to happen, you have to have free market capitalism, right? So free enterprise. And that comes down to what you just said, which is know thy customer, right? If you don't know what your customer really wants, and I mean, we could spend an entire day just talking about this one thing you said, which is don't ask them what they want. See what they really want based off of the data.
Absolutely.
So how did you guys capture that? Like, was it literally just at first like, they said they want a strong dark bold, so we bought a whole bunch of this, or we roasted all these different beans, but turns out they're only buying this crap.
In the beginning, it was just, it would have just been, trial and error, to be honest. I mean, now we have pretty robust systems of data analytics. I love data. I'm just, kind of that head type who loves to look through the data and see what's going on. So we've got a pretty robust system that's tracking the patterns, tracking, historical data now over 17 years. But in the beginning, it was just as simple as we'll try this and just watch, and remove the idealism from it. So for instance, we had a drink that, back again, so 2008, it was kind of a time where, the natural organic stuff was really just kind of flaring up. And so we had a drink called the Delaterra, and it was like organic chocolate, organic milk, and all these things. And we thought, hey, we had the thought at least that maybe people would really be interested in this and love it. But it was really expensive, obviously. And so we tried it. And within a couple months, we just said, look, the data is just showing like while people may say with their words, or this is the hot, trendy thing, that they want this type of drink, through their behavior, they're saying no, that they don't. And I think we got better and better at just kind of knowing and understanding, like, look, at the end of the day, this is what people want. I was going to go further to probably say also, in my business at least, we've really found that Americans are living entirely different lives in different communities, and not only just like different cities, but different, 5-6 miles from each other at this point. When we started in Portland, Oregon, we started over in Beaverton, which is right next to Nike and Intel, and that group of that community, if you will, when we would open up, you've got to, I guess if you can kind of imagine it, when we have a coffee shop, we're going to open this coffee shop. We're going to go in, we've got the model, and we really have kind of what I call a toolbox of ingredients. We have this, we have all these different sauces and syrups and flavors that we can make pretty much anything. And it really comes down to, what is the customer going to show they want? So going to like Beaverton and that more fit kind of, culture that Nike builds, white collar workers, that kind of thing, we have the exact same toolbox of ingredients, but we sell a lot more lattes, black coffees, call it the healthier skewed drinks. Whereas on the, east side of Portland, we sell 40% energy drinks, and we sell a lot more of the say like an extra large caramel blondie, which is a big mocha, which, and we sell both at both spots, but there's just kind of trends that you end up seeing.
So coffee flavored sugar water.
Exactly. So you kind of see what your customer, at least from my perspective, if you truly listen, you can kind of see what your customer will tell you, and you just have to have your ear to the ground. And then as soon as you're able, I think you build the systems and processes that collect that data and then give it to you in a useful way in a dashboard or something that says, hey, I can look this up at any time and review what do they tell me?
Right.
Because things also change,
so
even in real estate, right? Because real estate, I mean, we went through the whole thing of, so you say COVID, COVID was super scary for us for about 2 months. It was like, oh, wow, what's going on? This is looking super scary. Sales are going down. World's shutting down. I still remember, I think it was like, I forget, March 20th or 14th or something. The NBA shut down, and that was the day like it all fell. And for us, we had all of these workers on the ground. A lot of them are fairly young, 18 to 25 years old, or is the big cohort of our employees. And they're scared to death. And so we had to pull a lot of levers. We instantly started paying $4 more an hour. We stopped paying all of ourselves as executives at that time. And for the month of April of 2020, we paid them and got everything kind of settled out. Then, the sales dipped pretty bad through the month of March and into April, but by the end of April, sales were through the roof because we had drive-thrus on every single building. So it was great for us in that way. However, then what happened in 21 and 22 in the real estate side is you had $3 trillion in the economy driving, a ton of economic growth and expansion. And then every single concept from Chipotle to, Qdoba to every burger place, that the places that had not typically and historically needed a drive-thru or wanted one, now we're out looking and competing for our sites. So it was a super challenging couple of years to find high quality sites, but not go crazy and sign these leases that would give us an occupancy cost that would make the store, half as profitable. And that took a ton of discipline. And we did that. We worked super, super hard. Our development team and my partner Daniel did such a good job of finding us those right sites. But it was so difficult to stay disciplined when there's so many other concepts out there that are just signing $300,000, $250,000 a year ground leases and then having to build a building for $2 million, right? So,
yep. Well, in that time, and even the financial crisis, right? I was getting my MBA, 2009 through 11 up here in Washington, and I'm sure you're familiar. There's a gentleman by the name of Jim Donald, and Jim ended up taking over from Howard Schultz to run Starbucks, and then they didn't. It unfortunately, terrible timing. And he had implemented a few things inside the Starbucks stores that he's like, this is going to help. Introducing the food, right? Well, then financial crisis happens. The company ends up having to close because they overexpanded way too fast, way too much. They shut down, I think, 600 stores or more. Yep. Jim ends up getting fired, unfortunately. And lo and behold, all these concepts that we had were actually good ideas. And now you can't go to Starbucks in the world without some of these concepts existing. But timing was off. And economics were not on their side, and being disciplined, like you were saying, whether it's through the financial crisis or COVID or any of these other ups and downs we're going to have in the market, forever, sticking to principles. I think is really what you're saying is you guys developed really strong principles and core values early on that you guys stuck to.
Absolutely, and that I would say that 100%. Like I said, just to put the fine point on it, every single store. It has to stand up. My partner, again, quote him a lot, but Daniel says, if we move through the world and if we make sure that every single store could survive completely on its own and we give it its best shot, then when you put the conglomerate together, you're gonna have a successful company. So it's never, I think that's good enough. There's no good enough. Every single store, every single drink, every single business structure or system has got to be the most efficient version that it can be in using what you have available, in whether that, you got to remember, we think of limited resources sometimes as, and it's definitely true, dollars. Dollars are a limited resources, but so is time, so is attention. In my business, so is skill level, so is culture in the stores. I have to have at least half of the people have got to be BlackRock employees who have been working together for quite a while. So that they kind of, if you think of coffee is so interesting. It seems so simple on the surface, but to execute at this really, really high level that we are executing at, and some of our other competitors, it's got to be this kind of flawless experience that really makes people feel a certain way, feel connected to these employees, feel connected to us as a brand, feel cared for at the end of the day. And that is so difficult. You can't do that with normal employment structures. You have to have that. What you have to do is, and by the way, we have half of the turnover that the rest of our industry does. So we have about 70%, whereas the industry runs about 140. And we actually have a tenure that's about 3 times the average. So what we're able to do with that, if you think about it, say you and I are working in a store together, and you've been there for 4 years, I've been there for 5 years, and a customer rolls up and orders, say, a caramel macchiato, which is a Starbucks drink, right? It's not even our drink, but because you and I have been there for so long, we've built up that critical mass of skill and culture between us, and we know what we're doing. We don't even have to say a word to each other. You're going to start steaming the milk. I'm going to start, pouring the shots. And we've already converted that drink into our drink without saying a word. And we've got a flow together that's almost like we're in a band making music together without saying anything. And because we can do that by second nature, we're now able to truly and authentically connect with the guest and say, how was your day? Did you get that promotion at work? How was your daughter's soccer game? Whatever it is. If you work backwards from that, you can only do that if you have put a ton of work into building up that resource of skill and culture in your stores and pouring into your employees and making sure that you're efficiently training them and that you're giving them a bright future, a path to a bright future, making it a career so that they stay and they build that. So being super aware of what your limited resources are and how you're building them, I think is super important. And it's not just money. It's everything that your business does.
Well, and it all impacts the bottom line, right? Like, let's face it, one of the biggest expenses in any company is hiring. And it's not because, you're going to spend a year's worth of your salary right up front, but it's because that person's not profitable from the get-go, right? You have to train them. If you don't spend time training them, then they're not going to stick around. And then you just keep that revolving door, right? Which you don't want.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a really important thing because I feel that, there's a lot of, credence given to technology and software stacks and financial management and of course management in general and even the product market fit and customer desires and things like that as you and building up that avatar. But what you just said, I don't want people to miss this, is that in order to grow a successful company that is going to have legs and be able to withstand market ups and downs, yes, they have to have that skill set, which you can develop any skills really if you have the right person. But more importantly, it's creating a culture where training that leads to high-end customer service, right? Like, let's face it, you're in coffee, and granted, we've come a long way from the nickel a cup of black coffee at the diner back in the 50s to where we are today.
Yes.
I live in the Pacific Northwest, so I definitely understand the culture and whatnot, that third place mentality. But you can't have that without, like you said, no pun intended, but pouring into your employees, right?
Yeah.
And really helping them understand that they're not just employees there to make a cup of coffee, right? Because I'm just thinking, you give the example of the person rolling up to the drive-thru that wants the caramel macchiato that you guys don't even sell, but you have a variation of it, you call it something different.
Mm-hmm.
And the wrong employee would be like, oh, sorry, we don't have that here.
Right. 100%.
You don't say that. You say,
No.
Like you said, you continue on and you make them feel welcome for being there, even though that's not even on the menu. But you know what they want, and you give it to them. And
Absolutely.
I got to tell you, I love hearing that because I feel like since COVID specifically, customer service in the service industry in general has just fallen off a cliff. Like completely off, not even like an incremental decline, just like completely gone downhill. And there's a lot of factors for that, I know. But one of the biggest factors, I think, is that no one's holding people accountable for bad service. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that it's just such a testament to your guys' business that you are willing to train to that standard and hold people accountable as well.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. That's kind of the default. And that employee that might have started in a place, and we get them, started by saying we don't have that. The only way they learn that is by being immersed in the culture and hanging around the people that have been here for years and years and watching tens of thousands of interactions that those tenured employees have with customers to learn the right way to do it and the right way to exude that hospitality and to truly care for the guest and do it the Black Rock Coffee Bar way. So yeah, no, it takes a ton of intentionality and investment into that skill and resource. And people, by the way, are our biggest thing. And yeah, absolutely. You have to be kind of aware of that stuff. We do. As far as accountability, we actually we brought on a new CEO. So I guess to skip a little bit further into the story, but post 2020, post COVID, but actually really in 2018, I'd mentioned we began franchising early on to survive, but by 2018, 10 years in, the franchising, because of what you and I just talked about, just how much of a culture business is and what the difference is between a coffee shop and a coffee company that's run at a high culture level versus one that's not. the franchising thing just wasn't working for us anymore. It's impossible to build that culture and really keep that skill training and pour into the employees in a way that's meaningful to them through franchisees. So we started actually in 2018 rolling our franchisees back up, buying back all of the franchises, interrupted by COVID a little bit, but by 2022, we had one unified company and about 100 stores. But that was also the time when, we'd gone then from all of us who were, the founders and a lot of the operators. We actually invited on several of our franchisees. They now have different positions in the company. Our head of development is a franchisee. Our COO is a former franchisee. Pardon me. So we invited the people we knew that had a place on the team on, but none of us had ever run more than 5 stores, a piece. And now all of a sudden we're trying to run stores at scale at 100. And so it definitely kind of hit us, especially with, the goals of potentially, going public someday or doing something, taking those steps, really striving for that business excellence, that we needed to bring somebody else on. And so we started looking for somebody who had been, 5 miles further down the road than us, and ended up meeting who is now our new CEO, who's been running the company for the last 2 years. His name's Mark Davis. He's absolutely phenomenal. But one thing that he was drawn to, he's grown up in the industry. He was with Panera from 200 to 2,000 stores and worked at Bagel Brands, Einstein's Bagels, that group. But when he found out that we have a 96% customer service rating based on all the surveys we do, he was pretty blown away. And that's really what got him to join us. It was just that he'd never heard of anything like that. So to your point about measuring, we built a really intense survey that asks all these different questions about, how was the ordering process? Did they ask you about loyalty? All of the mechanical parts. Was it clean? Was it orderly? Was there any trash around? There's all the mechanical stuff. But what we end with, though, is how do we make you feel? Do you feel that Black Rock Coffee cares about their employees? Do you feel that Black Rock Coffee cares about you? Do you feel the right way? Because as humans, right, you've got to get to that part. It's not just it's not the little elements of this and that. It's what feeling are you going away from that your subconscious is telling you, this is a place I want to support. This is a place I feel connected to or not. So we built a really robust way to measure it. And then with that, we're able to drive performance. And then with Mark coming in and his experience, he's taken all of that to a whole nother level.
That's awesome. Well, we're about out of time here. So I got two last questions for you, which the first, Jeff, is, so what's next, right? You said you mentioned about 100 stores right now. What's the actual store count, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, so now we're actually, I believe, at about 158, I believe, at the moment. And so, and we have grown at 20% a year. We'll continue to grow at 20% a year. This year will be over 200 million in sales. That's an interesting question. Probably, 5-6 years in, I remember kind of having the realization of, wait a minute, okay, how does this story end, right? Like, what does this look like? And I think as entrepreneurs, we don't always think that way.
I was going to say, that's actually pretty early for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially given your age at that time.
Exactly. But I think it was kind of like, it was a little bit scary in the beginning. It was like, wait, I'd never thought of this. But and I kind of broke this up into say, well, it appears I've got 4 options, right? It's number 1 was crash and burn, which felt very possible in the first 5 years for sure. But by 6-7 years in, was finally feeling like that's not the case. Okay, so what's left? There was, take maybe the In-N-Out burger route where you just keep it in the family. You grow slowly over 50, 70 years and, give it to the kids. But, our business is so growth driven and our employees need growth. The culture needs growth. And, I think Daniel and I looked at each other and said, look, I don't think we do that to the company or the kids. And so then you're left with either selling to a strategic someday, so that would be like you're going to sell to another company, you're going to sell to, I don't know, a Nestle, a JB, one of these big conglomerates, RBI, or you're going to go and take your company public. And, I think as we looked at that, I said, the joke about entrepreneurs, right, is that their business is kind of like their kid, right? And so if I've got 3 kids and BlackRock's my 4th kid, the thought of me raising up BlackRock to 18, 20 years old and then essentially adopting it out to someone else as a strategic sale. Totally fine, but never felt like my North Star plan. Not to mention just valuations aren't as good. They're rearward looking. And so then it became, well, what about the public markets? And the public markets are something that, you should only be a public company if you have the right type of company that's predictable, that you can predict your performance, you can tell the market what you're going to do, and then you can go out and you can hit it or exceed it. You've got to have all these right ingredients, and you've got to be at the very pinnacle of business excellence. So I think that we set that out as our North Star and said, if we can, then that is where we're going to drive to. Because not only is it the highest valuations, it's the pinnacle of business. What it also does is it allows us to share the success with all of the employees that helped got us there. Our oldest employee started 7 months after we started the company. He's running part of Portland, Oregon. His name's Ben. And I mean, he's still here. He's still driving that. Brittany, who came not long after. So we've got some of these employees who have been here for so long. To take the public route someday allows us to then invite everybody in to be a part of it. And also for BlackRock Coffee to just continue on going and to grow into what we really think that it can over 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
I love it. All right. So last question, which is, we've talked a lot about it, but, looking back on everything, you've learned a lot in the last, 20 or so years doing this. What advice would you give to your younger self before you even began this journey?
Ooh, wow. Man, I think that for me personally, it was probably, I wouldn't change a lot. That's the hard thing with me, because I look back and everything that was an opportunity, that was a challenge, was an opportunity. The obstacle is the way, kind of a thing. So there's not a lot I would go back and change. I think that I would probably have removed some of the fear, and probably just been a little bolder with, just kind of not blowing in the wind as much as I did back then. It was just, I was under, I guess we didn't talk about it in town, but there's definitely parts where like you get into the anxiety becomes so much. There's so many variables that if they don't hit, you get into the anxiety, even panic attacks, stuff like that. I think I'd probably, for myself personally, I'd have to go back and say, just calm down, man. You're going to be okay. And it's all going to be fine. And it's hard to know that when you're in it. But if you really look back, and I do truly believe this, I think now in hindsight, maybe this would be it, that if you just really do the things that we talked about earlier, if you have a plan that's going to work, if you have a plan you've vetted and that really can make money, and if you put your time into it, and if you truly work at it and you execute on a good idea, this country will reward that, and you'll make it. So I think that's probably what I'd say, is that if you're willing to put the time into getting a good idea first, and then spend everything you've got executing that idea, it's going to work, and to rest in that.
Amen. Right. But I got to tell you, when you're going through it, it's really hard to even listen to those words, right? You don't even know what you're talking about. I'm about to go bankrupt.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But yeah, you're exactly right. And I think, that is the lesson that we have to learn as entrepreneurs, is not that we can avoid that, but that we have to embrace it and have to realize it's part of the journey to become the person you need to be in order to grow the successful company you want to grow. And
absolutely, yeah. And the reward you get is the deepening as a human, as a dad, as a father, as a business person. Every one of those times you go through it, you take something with you the rest of your life, that's so valuable.
Absolutely. So Jeff, I know people are going to want to look you up and find out where the nearest BlackRock coffee bar is. So how do they find you?
Yeah, I mean, we are in 7 states right now, mostly in the West and Texas, Colorado. But br.coffee is our website. And yeah, go head over. We're continuing to grow, and we'll be hopefully taking over the whole country here at some point. Be a little while, but we'll get there.
I love it. All right. Well, we'll make sure we put all that information in the show notes. And so you've been listening to the Angels, Exits, and Acquisitions podcast. Make sure you go check out those show notes and learn a little bit more about BlackRock Coffee. Jeff, thanks so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone.